Hello, this is Mark from Productive Computing. Thanks for joining me on this video. Today we are talking about the Claris FileMaker Calendar Add-on, and we are going to extend the functionality, allowing this calendar add-on to connect to your own system, your own database. So this particular question comes from a subscriber on our YouTube channel. They say, I have FileMaker 19 and I have a calendar on the layout. My question is, I don't want to have events on the calendar. Instead, I want to display orders and some of the information. Is there a way to do it? Thanks. Thank you, Spidey, for the question. That's largely why we're doing this video, is to answer that question. And it is a curious question because these add-ons are super powerful and slick and very quick to adopt. And what I thought we would do is just show you actually how to do that with existing data. In fact, we're going to be using a sample work order system that happens to be date sensitive, and we're going to be displaying those work orders in our calendar with the calendar add-on. So what I thought we would do is create a file from scratch. This will show you some additional things which I find pretty interesting and you may find interesting as well. I'm going to create a brand new file here in FileMaker, and I'll put that in my RAM disk here and I'll call it work orders. And I'll immediately turn around and delete the table that came complete with this brand new file. I'll also remove the table occurrences. This gives me truly a blank file with no relationships, no fields, no tables, no schema whatsoever. So what I thought we'd do is just jump on the internet here and show you another trick that I sometimes use. I'm going to put in a Google search for work orders sample data. This brings me to an interesting site here called contextures.com. And it allows me to pull some sample data, in this case from work orders. So as I scroll down here, we'll be able to see an option called work orders, and that says this sample file has fake work orders data, 22 columns, 9 columns with a calc, 1,000 rows of data. So I'm going to go grab that file now, and we'll download that to my computer, and it should be here, just like that. I'll bring it on my desktop here, sample work orders. It's a zip file, so let me unzip that quickly. There we go. All right, now it's an Excel file. So FileMaker has the ability to import directly from Excel. So I'll just go import records, choose the file, go to the desktop here, and grab the Excel file that we want to import from. Now it senses that the Excel file has multiple worksheets, so I want the work orders portion of that worksheet. And it shows here all the different fields. And I have the option to use field names as this record. Record 1 out of 1001 is going to be the field names. This will automatically import the data as well as create fields for the data that it represents. Now the target is unknown, so we need to go to target new table. So really I just did file import. I chose this option to use the field names, the first record as the field names, and then I chose new table. So like 1, 2, 3. And just like that, we now have a FileMaker file with 1,000 records within, representing fields somewhat appropriate to work orders. Let's take a look. I have a work order number. That'll come in handy. I have a district, which presumably is like a territory or a region. Lead tech is probably the person assigned to that work order. The service. Now I'm going to show you another trick here. As I put my cursor in any field, if I want to see all the data within that field, I can go to the menu called Insert from Index, and even though I'm not going to be inserting anything, it will bring me a list of all the data within that file, and this is a real handy way to see what's in that particular field. Let me reduce the screen a little bit here and bring it closer to like that. So this would be like the service type. Rush is probably a field that indicates whether it needs to be expedited or not. I don't think we need that field. I've got required date, work date, texts, and some parts, and some information on pricing, labor rates, parts, so on and so forth. Now, of particular note, I have the work date or the required date or the requested date and work date. So this will be really important, especially when you consider we have to put this on a calendar. Now, I happen to know for a fact that the calendar add-on requires a date to start, a date to end, a time to start, and a time to end. So it essentially needs 4 fields in order for it to be able to display at all. Not to mention some form of a identifier like a description, or in this case, we'll probably end up putting the work order number here on our calendar. So some of those fields we don't have here, so we'll need to create them along the way. But this is the basic data. Now, what I think we should do is also consider using this particular layout as a data entry layout, or the layout that we'll get to when we click on the calendar month view. So if that's the case, I want to clean up and remove the things that we don't need. In fact, I'll just go here to define fields or define database, and I will delete the things we don't need. So rush is not that interesting. We'll delete that. I think we'll do the warranty. We'll delete the warranty items. The labor hours, we might keep that. We'll keep the parts cost. The payment and the weight we'll delete. I'll leave these other three labor rates and the parts and the total cost, total fee, and these requested date and requested day and work day. I think those are the weekdays. So essentially I'm going to delete all of that here because I do want to give us the ability to kind of see what's going on. If we have too many fields, then it can get confusing pretty fast. All right, so now we've got the fields that we want on our work order. Now, this is not the prettiest work order. Remember, this is raw data that just came in, so obviously a work order would be formatted much nicer than this. But it does get the job done as far as demonstrating how to connect the two, which we're about to do here. All right, also notice that because the Excel spreadsheet was named this way, we have sort of an awkward long name for our table occurrence and our base table. So I'm going to go back here into File, Manage, Database, and you see here we're going to just rename that. So I'll click on Tables, and we're just going to rename this to Work Orders. This will be a lot cleaner way to name your table. A lot of times developers won't use a space in the table name because that'll give you some flexibility down the road if you want to make calls to it using SQL. But for now, and again, just to keep it as clean and as pleasant looking as possible, I will leave the space there and call it work orders. So now we've got essentially a work orders table. Now let's go ahead and add our add-on, our calendar add-on. Now, if you haven't already seen how to add the calendar add-on, we actually have another video that we did ahead of this one, which shows you all the basics of how the calendar add-on works and how the preferences interact with that. So I encourage you to possibly take a look at that video first before going much further here, because that'll set the groundwork. I'll put a link above this video to demonstrate where that is, and as well as a link in the description below this video. All right, so I want to go to layout mode. Okay, so I go to layout mode. I'm using Command L to do that. Then you have these options here on the left, fields, objects, and add-ons. You want to make sure you click add-ons. And then at the very bottom, there's a plus sign. And you can click on the plus sign and locate the calendar add-on. Click choose, and that should add the calendar along with all the components necessary to run a calendar. And if I go back to File, Manage, Database, you'll see that I have 2 additional tables here and 1 additional table occurrence and scripts along with that as well. If I go to Script Workspace, I can see all these scripts just got added as a result of that calendar add-on. And we're going to be working with some of these here in a minute. So with that in mind, I can go to the original work orders layout, which came with the file when we first created it, not to be confused with this work orders layout. In fact, I won't want to confuse that. So let's rename this layout right now. I'll go to Layout, and I will go to Layout Setup and call this Work Orders Detail View, or just Work Orders Detail. I think that's fine. And this one, this layout, I will actually rename that to Work Orders Calendar. Okay. So what I'll do next is I'll go to the Work Orders Calendar layout and I will drag the calendar here to that layout. In fact, I'll expand it here and I'll bring this border here so that everything connects. And then I'll do a couple other things here. I'll select this internal part of the calendar and I want to anchor that. So using this tool here, the position tool, I will anchor it on all 4 sides. All right, and then I'll go back to browse mode, which I'm using as Command B. It's Control B on Windows. And as I move this window, it should be getting wider. Let's see why that isn't working. Because the outer layout part here, the group also needs to be expanded and anchored left and right. So the group as a whole, as well as this internal part, need to be anchored. Okay, so now the calendar stretches. And I think I want to put a little border on the right and the bottom of that. So let's do that. Put a little border here like this, and a little border here like this. That gives it some breathing room. It makes it just more professional, I think. Now, technically speaking, if I have a border over here, I probably want the same border over here on the left. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just center this like so. There. Now we have a calendar view in preparation for our work order data. Okay, so you'll notice a button here for configuring the calendar, and it is pre-wired and predefined with all of these options here, and all of that comes when the add-on is installed. But I'm going to be selecting a work orders detail table instead of what it came with, because this is where our data is. If you recall, we named it work orders detail. That's the particular layout, and that's where the data is connected. So if I do that, what happens here is it's looking for proper fields in that table to connect to. Now, the first thing it asks for is a primary key field. Now, I could use the work orders number as a primary key, but generally speaking, you want your primary key to be something that isn't necessarily visible or defined by the user. That way you can preserve the integrity of such a primary key field. So I'll go create a primary key field and then come back. So I'll close this now. I'll go to the work orders detail layout, and I'll go to manage database, and we'll create a new field in our work orders. I'll just call it ID, and I'll make it a number field. And we want to assign that ID with some data. So I'll go to options here and then click serial number. And I'll use, for now, for the purposes of ease of use, I'll use the serial number method to create my ID. Okay, there's my ID on my layout. If it isn't there already, you can go get it by going to layout mode and dragging down and defining your ID that way. But we do have our ID here, so I'm going to expand this a little bit. I'm also going to bring it up here because it's sort of a dominant thing, at least during development. So now I'm in back to browse mode, and I want to assign all 1,000 records with an ID. And I can do that in a single motion. I can put my cursor here in the ID field, and I'll go to Records, Replace, Field Contents. And I can replace those field contents with serial numbers, and I'll also have it automatically update serial numbers in the entry options. So I'll click Replace, and just like that, it puts in IDs for all 1,000 records. All right, let's go back to our calendar and go back to that Configure button and work on this again. We have the work orders detail is where our data is coming from. Our primary key field now is, in fact, the work orders ID. Now the title field, this is what's actually going to show up on the calendar. I can use the actual work order number. That'll be something that we can start with at least. And then the start date field and the start time field, date field, and end date field and end time field are all required, as you see here in red. But if you recall earlier in the video, we didn't actually have anything other than maybe the first date field. So we'll cancel out of here again. I'm kind of doing this on purpose to show the methodology. In order to figure this stuff out on your own, you have to sometimes do trial and error, and you have to go back and forth. But I'll go back to the work orders detail here, and then I will construct an end date as well as a start time and end time. And let's go do that. So I'll go back here to manage database. I think what I want to do is I want to just make it easy, and I will have an end date automatically calculate to represent anything that is in the required date or the requested date. So let me do that now. End date, and I will make it a calculation type field, which is risky business when it comes to working with these add-ons. Sometimes the calcs don't actually work with the add-ons. So I want the end date to be really equal to whatever this request date is. And I want to make sure my format is of date type. All right. And now we have the end date. So if the requested date were to go to, let's say, 9/2, then the end date would follow suit. and that gets the calendar in a position where it will be able to display properly. Now we also need a time and a time start and a time end. So for now, we can just create 2 empty time fields. There's no time at all on this work order, but there needs to be, at least for the add-on. So I'll do time start, and I'll make that a type time, and time end, and I'll make that a time as well. And for now, I'll leave them both blank with no particular calculation. You'll see why in a minute when we start working with this. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the calendar, go back to the configuration option here, and kind of repeat what we were doing earlier. Work orders detail, select the primary field, then select the title field that will display. Then we'll do the request date as the start date field. The start time should be start. The end date will be the end date field, and then the end time will be here, just like that. And just be sure that your dates are date formatted and your times are time formatted, at least in the field type. And that's all that it requires for minimum requirement for your work orders data to show up on the calendar. And just like that, there they are. There's work order A01025, and it will behave just like it would with any data here on the add-on if I wanted to. Aha! So that message is a result of the fact that this table doesn't have anything to look at. So we want to make sure that this table is related to the work orders table as well. That way the add-on will have everything it needs to do the functionality we're trying to get a hold of. So now when I click and drag this event, it will work. But here it's asking this action cannot be performed because this field is not modifiable. And I think it's actually talking about the end date. And remember how I said it doesn't like calculations? And I thought I tested this. Actually, this one will work if I make it an auto enter calc. So I'll make this a date field, change that to auto enter calc, like so. Now it works fine. So now that I've got the basic data connected here in the month view, let's look at some other options we have to extend the functionality even further. I noticed that each one of my work orders has a timestamp of 12 a.m. And that's because it wants to display the time on there. But if you recall, we actually just added those fields but didn't really populate it with any data. There are a couple of records here that have data, but most of them are blank. In fact, the ones with data are the ones that we actually moved manually. So most of those are blank. But for work orders month view, I think we don't want to see any time at all. I just want to see the work order number and maybe some additional information, but right now we don't need time. So how do we do that? So we'll want to go back here to the calendar configurator and go to optional fields, and you'll see this one called all day field. So this will allow you to pick a field representing if that event is all day. And an all day event doesn't actually display the time because it is in fact all day. So what I'd like to do now is go back to my data and create a field called all day. I'll make it a number field because presumably it's going to be values of 0 or 1. I'll call it all day. And I will populate all the records with a 1, indicating that each one of these is an all-day event. Replace with 1, just like that. Now, what you probably would do is if you know that you never want to see a time on there, I would go in to make sure that the all-day has a data of 1 so that every new record automatically gets the all-day indicator. So let me go back to the calendar and jump into that configuration area, go to the optional fields and go to that all-day field, and we'll assign all day to that, save the changes, and voila, now the time has been removed and I'm left with just the work order number. So we're getting closer here to the ideal situation that we're looking for in terms of displaying work orders on a calendar. So what else could we do here? You might not want your users to be able to easily change the work order request date simply by dragging. You might want that particular functionality reserved for when you're in that form view working directly on a work order. It might be a privileged thing to do to be able to change the date of a work order, and you might not want it to be so easy to do here on the month view as you've seen. So in that case, we can make the records uneditable, and that here, you might have noticed it earlier, is also another optional field which says editable field. So I'm going to do something very similar now, back to my data, and I'll create another field called editable. And I'll make that a number field as well. And I will have this automatically enter the value of 0, meaning 0 is not to be edited. I don't want these to be edited, at least in the eyes of the calendar. That doesn't necessarily mean they're not editable in general. This is just a placeholder for the calendar. So I will do something similar. I'll put a 0 for all the records here in our calendar. Replace those with 0. And then I'll go back to month view or the calendar view, go to the configurator, locate those optional fields, and select for the editable field, the field we just created called editable. And I'll save that. So now the calendar sees these records as non-editable, which means I won't be able to edit them by way of dragging and dropping like I did before. So that's a nice semi-advanced feature in order to do that. Now, does it mean that these are not editable when I double-click here and I change something here and here? No. Those are still completely editable. It has nothing to do with the record being editable in that particular sense. It has everything to do with being editable from a calendar standpoint. Now, you might have noticed that I just double-clicked that event to get into this detail view, and now I'm locked in this window. I have no navigation out of it. So for starters, if you ever find yourself in this situation, which happens a lot when you're working with add-ons, especially ones that have card windows like this, you can simply create a quick script here under Script Workspace and create a script called Close Window and add the command Close Window and then save that. I'm choosing Command S to save and then perform it using this button. And now you've closed the window, you're not necessarily locked out. But on that note, we should actually add a close button to that window. So let me go back here to Work Orders Detail. And here's the view that we're going to be presented with when I edit it. So we'll just create a quick button here. It says Close. And I actually could perform a single script step, but I'll just actually perform the script that I just created called Close Window. All right, let's make it look a little bit more like a button. There we go. All right, so now when I'm in the calendar view and I want to work on a work order, I'll have the ability to close it without incident. So that brings me to my next point. How did the original calendar add-on handle closing the detail window? So if I go to the layout that originally came with the add-on, which is called Event Display, you can see it also has a close button. Let's open this up and see what it does. This actually performs the script FC Calendar Close Event Card Window button. And I like this idea better because chances are this script is doing more than simply closing the window. It's actually setting the variable, the add-on UUID, it's closing the window, and it's performing the refresh. So this would be a much better way of closing your window using the same script that the original add-on used. So let me connect our new button with this FC Calendar Close Event Card. So I'll go to our particular detail here, and I will assign that button with the script Close Event Card Window button. There. So now we have a much more robust close button, one that we know is going to work. Not only will it close the window, but it will refresh the calendar. As an example, if I want to adjust the work order number here from a 49 to a 49.1, and close that, you'll see that the calendar was able to refresh and show me that that had changed to a .1 in that work order number. Okay, let me put that one back. All right, what else can we do? We could actually take advantage of the color coding system here and go to the configurator and take a look at the styles. The styles for the calendar can color code it. Now we don't have a style field, so we should add one. So let's go find out how the original calendar styled its data. So I'll go to layout mode and we'll go to the original event display. And here's our style option. So we know that the style presents a pop-up menu and it's using the FC calendar styles. And these are the different styles I can choose from. So those are valid values. So I'm just going to grab those here and put them on my screen here just for a second while we work with this. And then I'll go back to our work orders detail and we'll add a field called style. And I'll make it a text field, which it already is by default. All right, so there's our style field. Now we could actually immediately turn around and make this style a drop-down list or a pop-up menu like we saw earlier, and we can choose the style. If I go back to browse mode here and take a look at that, we could do that and have it colored based on the actual name of green, purple, red, and yellow, so on and so forth. And it will work just fine so long as we connect that style. But I thought we'd take this a step further and say, why can't the style or the color be a representation of the service? And I'll do this from index trick again. The service, in fact, I'll grab a screenshot of that as well. Maybe I want my delivery to be a certain color and my installs to be another color and my repair to be another color still. So let's make that happen so that our style has a little bit more meaning than just a simple color, that it actually is smarter than that. So to do that, I'm going to make my style calculate based on the service type. So I'm going to create a quick script here that says calculate style. And I'm going to really just put a couple of script steps. The first one is to set the field, and the field I want to set is called style. I want to set that field. I want to choose the style when I choose a work order service type. So the field I'm going to set is style. And what do I want to do here? Well, I happen to have both sides of the equation here. So I'm going to say, put a case statement in, and I'll say case service right here equals assess, then blue. And that's the literal word I'm going to use. Copy that, paste that, and we'll do another condition here. We'll say deliver green. All right, this will be install. Install will be yellow. Repair will be red, appropriate for repairs. And replace will be dark green. How about that? Okay, and we'll close our condition here. And then we'll commit the data, we'll commit the records here when I do that. So that's calculate style. And what I like to do is set up a quick script trigger, and I'm doing that by holding the command key and double clicking the service field. It brings up this set script triggers dialog box. What I like to do is when the object is saved, we actually perform the script calculate style. All right. So let's put this to the test. Let's just say that I have a service. In fact, what I want to do now is I want to actually put this as a value list so that my service is a drop-down as well. So let me just hard code that into a new value list. So I'll manage value lists and create a new value list for service. Just simply type it in. Okay, that takes care of that. And then I'll go back to layout mode and assign this field with that drop down. So I'll do a drop down list of service. All right, so now when I pick a service, let's say install, it should be yellow. When I pick a service of deliver, it should be green. When I pick a service of assess, it'll be blue. Repair will be red, and replace will be dark green. So what I'd like to do next is populate the styles for each one of these records so that they all have some value. And once I do that, it should show up on the month view accordingly by color. So the way to do that would be to use that same calculation that we used in the script, which I have here, and just copy that to the clipboard. Now I've got my calculation copied, and I can put my cursor here in the style box. Let me just take out the pop-up menu and just put a regular old edit box here. Let's go here and go to replace field contents and replace with a calculated result. I'll paste that result, which puts in all the colors according to the service type. Push OK, push replace, and now all my records should have the appropriate color based on the service. And because this is correct, I now need to just go to the month view here, the calendar, and wire that in. So I'll go to the configurator and I'll go to the optional fields. And here is my event style. I'll associate that with my new field and watch this. Now all my work orders are color coded based on style or type. Okay, next, let's add some tooltips. Tooltips can be handy because you can only display so much here on the calendar month view, but it'd be nice to be able to hover over some of these things and get some more information about these work orders. So let's go take a look at our detail view here and determine what we might want to see. So I think a good tooltip might be to maybe indicate the technician or the lead tech, and then maybe in parentheses, the total fee. Those are two pieces of information that might be interesting in a tooltip. So I could create a calculation to do this, but the calendar won't respond to a calculation, at least not for the tooltip field. It actually needs a regular old text field. So much in the same way that we're using style here as a text field or service as a text field, we're going to do the same thing with this new tooltip that we're going to create. So I'll call this tooltip, and I'll make it a text field. And here it is, down here at the bottom. Let me bring it up so we can work with it a little closer. All right. So for this, I'm going to do something very similar to what I did when we calculated the style. I'll, in fact, duplicate this script by choosing Command D on the keyboard, and I'm going to go calculate, and I'm going to type this as calculate tooltip. So let's assign this to the tooltip field. And let's change the calculation. So in this case, it's a little simpler of a calc. All we need to do is display the tech. So I'll put here a quote for lead tech, colon, with a space. And then we'll put the lead tech name, which is here. And then we'll put an ampersand to join this. And we'll put a space, parenthesis, another parenthesis, and then another ampersand to join that. And this will be the total fee, then an ampersand, and we'll join another closing parenthesis. And that will be our tooltip calc, but I'm also going to copy that to the clipboard while I'm here. Let's assign that tooltip. So I'll go to layout mode, and anytime that the technician changes, the lead tech in this case, anytime that object is saved, I want it to calculate the tooltip. And anytime I change the total fee, I want it to calculate the tooltip. So let's put that to the test. Let's change my lead tech, and I'll use my famous get from index, And we'll change that to Ling instead of Con. And then it shows here lead tech is Ling, 351 is the total fee. And that's correct. If I change the total fee to 352, that should also update it like that. Now there's one little thing that I'd like to see, which is to put a $ here before the 352. So let's go back into our script, and where we calculate the tooltip calc, let's add a little $ here for that, and maybe even a space. Oh, and while I'm here, let's copy that to the clipboard again, because we're going to need that to replace all the existing records. All right, let's put this to the test. Let's go to 353. And there it is. That's a little bit more like what you'd see in a tooltip. So let's replace all of these with that calculation. So I'll do the same thing. Records, replace field contents with a calc. Paste this calculation formula. Hit replace, and now all of my tooltips are there, but you'll see that in some cases, the way the data, the sample data came over, it's not really rounded. So what I think we should do is round to the nearest 2 digits. So let's do that next. I'll do that same formula, and we'll just add a quick addition to it, one more function to the formula, and then we'll copy that back to the script. So here's our original formula. We want to round this particular work order total, and we want it to round to 2 decimal places like that. Now I'll grab this new improved formula to my clipboard, copy that, replace, and now we've got that. Now, technically speaking, we want the 0 to show up, and here's another one where if there's no data, we want that. So our formula needs to be tweaked even more to be 100% correct and precise. But this is probably far enough to get the point across of how to do tooltips. Let's just quickly change that in our script. Okay, I'll just paste that new and improved script. You could also round to 0, and that will round up or down to the appropriate whole value. But now when I go back to the calendar, I just need to wire in the tooltip using the configurator. Go to optional fields, and tooltip is right here. I can select our tooltip field, save those changes, and now as I hover over each one of these work orders, I'll have a built-in tooltip indicating the lead tech as well as the total fee, which is a nice feature, really advanced feature when you think about what this would take to do in FileMaker prior to an add-on. Tooltips themselves aren't particularly difficult, but making this calendar is, especially when you consider in the old way of doing it, you would have a portal for every day of the month. And then you'd have to do that for the week view. You'd have to consider day view and how it works. So this is a lot more advanced. It's a lot more of what users would expect when they consider a calendar. Now here's a blank record. Why is it blank? It's blank because we don't have a work order number. So test work order number. And I'll do that on purpose, something different to make it stand out. Yeah, and then here again, if I change the service type to a repair, it will change color accordingly. Now let's do one more feature here in the calendar view, and that is to take advantage of a filter option. The filter option will allow us to put a particular lead tech name at the top, and it will isolate and identify only those work orders that pertain to that lead tech. So for that, I'll create a global field here right in this calendar view or this calendar layout. And this particular calendar is still associated with work orders. So I can put the global right here, and that'll be just fine. I'll call it filter. And I'll keep it a text field, but I will change one option on it. Under options, I'll make the storage global. That way it won't matter what record I'm looking at. Once I change the value, it's global for me in my session. Me meaning the user. Each user will have their own global value there. So while I'm here, I'll select that field and move it to, I can move it into the top navigation, I suppose. Call it filter. So now that I've added the field for filtering, I will make a value list so that we can pick from the selected list of technicians. And to make this easy and for demonstration purposes, I'll just simply pick a value list based on the values that are already entered in all our work orders. So I'll call this lead tech, and the table is going to be work orders and then lead tech. So I just want to simply get a value for all lead technicians and have that appear here. For that to appear here, I have to make a pop-up menu or maybe even a drop-down list. And then we'll do lead tech as my values. And then let's take a look at this. So now there's my values for all the lead technicians. And now I have to tell the calendar to use this field as a filter. So I'll go here under options and look at filter settings and the query field or the search field. So let's read the difference between the two. The field to store the search query in, if you select a query field, the FC calendar refresh script must run after the user enters a query. To run the script, either add a script trigger to the query field object or add a button. And then the search field is here. So we really do need both. The query field is going to be the filter. I'll call it the work orders filter, and the search field is going to be lead tech. That's what we wanted to search through. Okay, so now I don't have the refresh button triggered, but let's just put it in for now. Let's just choose Burton and then go up a month and down a month. And now only the Burtons show up. There's a little bit of a lingering layout object here. Let me delete that. Okay. And those are the Burtons. If I choose Lopez and then go up and down, and the only reason I'm going up and down is because that forces the calendar to redraw. There's some Lopez's, and I know that because when I use the tooltip, I can see that the tech is Lopez. All right, so now how do we get this to refresh automatically when I select it? Using a similar technique to what I've been doing all along, I will just go to layout mode and hold the command key while double clicking the field, and that will allow me to, on object save, to refresh. Now, where is the refresh script, you might be asking yourself? Let's see if there's a script called refresh. And there it is. Now, where is that located exactly? It's over here under the FC Calendar API, send messages to add-on calendar refresh. Now we might need an optional script parameter here indicating the UUID of the web viewer that we want to push that to, but let's just see if it works without it. Go back to browse mode. All right, so we're on Lopez in July. Let's go to June and then go to Ling. There's Ling. Let's double check that. It is. And let's go to Burton. And those are the Burtons. So it looks like we've done our job here as far as refreshing goes. And this filter should persist whether you're on the week view, there's all the Burtons, or on the day view. This will be the one all-day event for Burton on June 1st. Here's Ling's event on June 1st, and so forth. So that's how we do the filter. So you'll see there's a plus button here. It should bring us to the appropriate layout because we define that under the configurator and should allow us to make a new record. Now, in your system, you might find that you don't want people to create new work orders directly from the calendar at all because it's not part of the normal workflow. It's not how work orders get created. Perhaps they get created already through some other mechanism in your system. So if that's the case where you actually don't want people to create new records from here, you can simply select this button by clicking several times here until you get to the button itself, and then you can delete it with the delete key. In this case, I'll just cut it and move it over here off the layout in case I want to refer to it later. Back to browse mode, and now that button and that functionality won't be there. Likewise, as you may have learned with working with add-ons already, you can do the same thing with this. I'll cut that and move that over here as well, so that the configuration button is only there when we absolutely need it, or maybe only there for administrators on a particular administrator view. And just to draw some distinction, when I click on this object here, it's a grouped object that includes buttons for up and down nav, the today button, day, week, and month button. These are all independent buttons. So in a sense, they're easy to edit, easy to move, easy to manipulate. From here on down, this is the actual web viewer. Anything within the web viewer is harder to manipulate because it involves the JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and so forth. So this is sort of the add-on that's built in with the functionality that you've been seeing. But these buttons up here are free for the taking, which means you could remove them and put your own buttons or do any number of different navigation strategies. But keep in mind that whatever navigation strategies you do with your own buttons, you'll have to assign it in a way that the calendar responds accordingly. So you'll have to see what scripts are being triggered under each one of these buttons, how they're being triggered, and if there's any optional script parameters, you'll need to include those too. So I think that takes care of all the main aspects of connecting this add-on with data that you might already have, and some options to do that using what essentially is built-in functionality. But compared to building a calendar from scratch and doing all the same thing, we're talking a night and day difference in terms of capability relative to time spent. So if what you see in this video is intriguing and you want to learn more and you need to reach out and get some questions answered and some help, you can certainly feel free to reach out to the Claris communities. Oftentimes, this community is more than giving in terms of what they will do to help you get started and get underway with your own solution. Perhaps they'll help you over a hurdle, or they'll even give you an example of what you're trying to accomplish, and they'll help you through that at no additional charge most of the time. If you run a professional business and you like the idea of putting a calendar in your system, you don't have the time or the energy, or you don't really feel like learning all this from scratch, certainly our company can be hired to do such a thing. We have general support and we'd be happy to help. Simply send an email to sales@productivecomputing.com or go to our website and check out to find out more. I'll put a link below the description of this video for that as well. As always, thanks for joining us on this video. Feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one.